Hey, it's Dave here, and in this video we're going to talk about the role of yeast and fungal overgrowth, particularly Candida, in creating the symptoms that are labelled by the medical system as irritable bowel syndrome. So we've already talked in this series about SIBO, which is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. In this one we're going to talk about small intestinal fungal overgrowth, which is SIFO. And this can also happen in the large intestine. So we're not just talking about the small intestine here. And by the way, Candida can overgrow in your mouth, in your esophagus, in your stomach. It's pretty invasive if it gets the chance to spread and overgrow and cause problems. So basically what we're talking about here is yeast and fungal overgrowth. That's the generality of the situation. Yeast and fungi are not just limited to Candida. There's a whole bunch of other ones as well. There's Geotrichum, there is Penicillium, there's Saccharomyces, there's one called Rhodotorula. There's a whole bunch of fancy exotic names of these yeast and fungal organisms that can overgrow and cause problems. So for this particular video, we're talking about problems in the intestine. So these yeast and fungal organisms, or some of them anyway, are actually supposed to be there in many people. The scientific literature sort of suggests that about 60% of people with no symptoms, when their microbiome is analysed, they'll typically have some level of Candida and other yeast fungal organisms in the digestive tract. And that collectively, all these different bugs are called the mycobiome. So not the microbiome, which is everything. It's bacteria, parasites, yeast, viruses, etc. This is the M-Y-C-O, mycobiome. Now, it only becomes problematic in most cases when it overgrows. So it's when you get an abundance of these organisms in much higher amounts than you have your friendly microbes. And so then we've got to start to ask, well, why does that happen? And that's a topic for another video. Just as we looked at why SIBO can develop, we've also got to really look at why Candida and fungal overgrowth develop, because they don't just happen without good reason. You don't just wake up one morning with Candida overgrowth and you sitting there as this innocent victim. There's always something in your lifestyle, something that's happened that tends to trigger the overgrowth of these organisms. But once they're in there, here's the problem. They secrete toxins. They have their own metabolism and they have their own defense mechanisms against our immune system and against the friendly microbes that are trying to keep them in check as well. So you've got things like gliotoxin or gliotoxin. This is a big one because it can actually erode the secretory IgA in your intestinal lining, which lowers your immune defenses. Gliotoxin can also damage white blood cells, which are part of your immune system as well. It can create acetaldehyde, arabinose, tartaric acid and things like that, which can affect energy production, for example, in the body, particularly when they start to leak through the gut wall into the bloodstream. At certain times, and under certain conditions, Candida and these other microbes can become what we call invasive. So they can literally grow roots into your intestinal wall and they can invade the intestinal lining. And when they do that, they can trigger this concept or this phenomenon of leaky gut syndrome, or increased intestinal permeability. And the increased intestinal permeability allows all the stuff in your digestive system that would normally be filtered out and broken down properly before it enters your bloodstream to leak through into the bloodstream in a relatively unprocessed state, and your immune system doesn't recognize it, so it attacks it. And this is where we start to get all kinds of problems elsewhere in the body, in addition to the direct effect of these toxins that are entering the bloodstream in larger amounts than the liver can cope with. So these toxins then end up floating around the body, affecting the nervous system, the energy production, the hormone levels, and what have you. So it's not a good scene when you have a nasty case of this going on. Now, one of the most incredible factors I find about Candida is the medical system recognizes Candida and fungal overgrowth in the oral cavity. It's called oral thrush. You'll find hundreds of pictures on Google if you just Google oral thrush and look at the images of a white coating on the tongue. You'll also see images of esophageal Candida overgrowth as well. And we all know about vaginal thrush, for example, particularly women. who have outbreaks of thrush after using antibiotics and things like that, or after a stressful period in life. The yeast and fungal organisms can create like a white discharge from the vaginal canal, which is yucky. But it's the same thing as what you get when you have white coating on your tongue. Now, given that you can have this overgrowth in those different areas of the body, why wouldn't you have yeast and fungal overgrowth in your digestive system where it's nice and warm and moist? Perfect conditions for these organisms to thrive. Because the medical system doesn't recognize this. So we're happy to recognize vaginal candida overgrowth. We're happy to recognize oral candida overgrowth, esophageal candida overgrowth, also in the lungs as well. It's known that yeast and fungal organisms and mold organisms can overgrow there, but they don't recognize digestive candida overgrowth. And so it's ignored. Yet we know for a fact by finding this in people and then dealing with it with either nystatin, which is a medical pharmaceutical antifungal, or with antifungal herbs, that people's symptoms respond amazingly well often to getting rid of this stuff. Okay? So what do you need to do about this? Well, if you suspect that you might have some candida or fungal overgrowth going on, maybe your tongue is white, maybe you get outbreaks on your skin, on your feet, athlete's foot and fungal toenails and things like that. Maybe you've just got irritable bowel syndrome and you haven't found an answer yet. Well, there's a likelihood that something like this might be going on. So you've got to test. You've got to test for it. You've got to figure out exactly what's going on. Is it candida? Is it small intestinal bacterial overgrowth? Is there something else going on? Do you have food sensitivities? What's the pattern for you as an individual? And to do that, you can run stool testing, you can run organic acids testing, you can run testing to see if your immune system is reacting against candida antibodies. There's all manner of different things you can do. So what I recommend is that you look at the links beneath the video window, how you can book a consultation so we can review your case, figure out what's going on, or just dart straight in and look at the types of lab tests that are available to you if your doctor's not willing to consider all of this stuff. In the next video, we're going to talk about how and why candida and small intestinal fungal overgrowth would tend to develop. Because as I said right at the start, it doesn't just appear, poof, it's there after not being there. There's always a reason for that. And I think it's really important, if we want long-term wellness, to make sure we understand why it arrived in the first place so that we can stop it from coming back. So I hope it's been helpful, and I look forward to seeing you on the next video. Thank you.